A significant aspect of the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, or the fight and flight response, is that there is a gland over the kidney, the adrenal gland, and from the middle of this gland, the adrenal medulla, epinephrine and norepinephrine are released during exercise or during an emergency, and they then function as hormones rather than as neurotransmitters. Why is this and where do these cells come from? Well, it turns out that the nervous system forms in the embryo as a flat plate, which then forms two folds, and these folds then fuse to make the neural tube from which the brain and spinal cord develop. But on the ridges of these folds are what are called the neural crest cells. Literally, they are on the crests of the folds which are fusing to form the tube. And it is from these neural crest cells that a number of important cell types develop, such as the cells of dorsal root ganglia, of sympathetic chain ganglia, and of the adrenal medulla. And so embryonic stem cells migrating from the neural crest not only form the sympathetic neurons in the adrenal medulla, but also the chromaphene cells which release epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those neural crest cells which release epinephrine and norepinephrine are called chromaphene cells because they were originally stained with chromium. They had an affinity for chromium. It seems that there are different types of these chromaphene cells, some of which are producing norepinephrine, others produce the enzyme, the PNMT enzyme, which causes them to make epinephrine or adrenaline. 80% of the catecholamine released from the adrenal medulla is epinephrine and 20% norepinephrine. For the most part, these hormones are equivalent, but epinephrine is more powerful and has a greater effect causing respiratory bronchodilation, while norepinephrine has a greater effect on vasoconstriction and blood pressure. Tyrosine is an amino acid that, in addition to having an amino group, as all amino acids do, it also has a ring like benzene, which is called the catechol group. And there are neurotransmitters called catecholamines because they are neurotransmitters which have both a catechol group and an amine. This includes dopamine, which is produced from tyrosine. But in cells which make the enzyme dopamine beta hydroxylase, also known as dopamine beta monooxygenase, an H is converted to an OH, and this then creates norepinephrine or noradrenaline from dopamine. Some chromaffin cells produce an additional enzyme, phenylethanolamine, N-methyltransferase, or PNMT, which converts norepinephrine into epinephrine or adrenaline. A methyl group, a CH3 group, is added to norepinephrine to convert it to epinephrine. It is from the same embryonic precursor cells that give rise to sympathetic neurons that produce these chromaffin cells. Chromaffin cells actually do exist outside the adrenal glands in places such as the vagus nerve, the carotid artery, the bladder, the prostate, the liver, with the greatest concentration being an area known as the organ of Zucker-Kandel, which can be found where the abdominal aorta splits or at the origin of the inferior mesenteric artery. There is some discussion as to whether these chromaffin cells are modified postganglionic neurons or whether they are simply related, having been derived from the same embryonic precursors.